good afternoon to everyone. So welcome to the ACTS Senior Treasurers panel. So today we are actually very lucky to have very senior treasurers practitioners in the market, well regarded in the circle, in the industry. So I have I'll just introduce them. So we have Yian Ping, she's actually the APAC treasurer at Shell. And then on the other end, we have Sonia, she's the treasurer from J&J, Johnson & Johnson. So without holding back from the interesting discussion that we have coming up for the next 1 hour, and I highly encourage you to ask them questions, take this opportunity to augment your learning experience for this workshop, asking the questions that you really want to hear from the senior folks, not myself, but them, the ladies. So Yian Ping, can I trouble you to make some self-introduction?
Okay, I think first of all, thank you Seng Ti as well as NUS for giving me the opportunity to be here, to have a kind of open discussion with every one of you. And I also like to thank every one of you here for taking the time. I know it's actually a very challenging time. I think a lot of people have increased workload. And nevertheless, I think you actually make a right decision to spend time to upskill yourself and to prepare for the future. Really thank you for your participation. For me, I'm actually the regional treasurer for Shell. I assumed the role in 2017. So you'll hear a little bit more later, perhaps. I actually come from a general finance background. So most of my career has always been in what we call the finance in the business, supporting my downstream businesses, mainly the refineries and the chemicals. So I had the opportunity to come to the role, and I can tell you that it's one of the best roles that I've ever had. And so apart from looking after the treasury, I'm also one of the trustees on one of our pension funds in the region, and I'm also one of the board of directors on one of our captive insurer in Singapore.
Good morning, everybody, and I also thank you all for being here, and also want to reiterate that please take the opportunity to engage in conversation, because I think that brings the most benefit to everybody. That question that often you hold back is what somebody else wanted to hear. So Sonia Clifton Bligh is my name, and I'm the regional treasurer for Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson has a number of business groups, but predominantly we're based in healthcare. I have been in this particular role for 8 years, but prior to this position, I also held other treasury roles as well as various finance roles. So similar to Yian Ping, I was also in finance. I'm accountancy trained, and I started off my career in accountancy, but at one point in time, I was given a huge portfolio of investments to manage, and I realized, wow, that's a lot of money, and I know nothing about it. So I took myself off to do a course, a little bit like this actually, to understand a bit more about financials, risk management, how to make money, how to protect assets. And from there, I realized that, gosh, I kind of like treasury. So it's always been, I think it's always worked very nicely in combination with my finance background. But I did start J&J in a role that was called treasury accountant. Then I did some various other roles, and then I came back and did another treasury role. And then I went off and did some other roles, and then I came back to the role that I'm in. So it's always had a calling for me. I've been drawn to the world of treasury. I very much enjoy it. Similarly, work very closely with business partners. It's a very broad scope, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more about that very soon.
Well, thanks Yian Ping and Sonia for joining us, and especially, so I'll be serving as the thorn among the roses, right? And feel free to ask more questions to engage them and get the answers that you want for your burning questions. So this is actually a very rare opportunity. So just to top it up a little bit, so both Yian Ping and Sonia are actually our EXCO member at ACTS. They are actually the ones that are spearheading our education pillars. So this part about engaging with new talents, this part about creating workshops and programs for our community to upgrade and upskill and share. So that's very important, and hence feel free to ask them. Sonia, could you share with us the setup in your organization as well?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so similarly, Johnson & Johnson is a global organization. We're headquartered in the US. And in the US, we have a global treasury organization. We also have a major operation also in a treasury center in Belgium. We organize ourselves around centers of excellence. The Centre of Excellence that I'm responsible for here in region is called the RTSC, or the Regional Treasury Services Centre, and my particular expertise is in cash management. And there are equivalent of myself in the other regions. So there's one in São Paulo that's responsible for LATAM. Then there's one also in Birsa, responsible for the EMEA region. And then there's one in the US, in New Brunswick, responsible for North America. So that's for that particular COE. On top of that, we have COEs that are responsible for payments, global payment settlement. We have them responsible for centralized cash management, as well as for hedging activities and netting activities. Our capital markets is another centre of excellence. We also have a centre of excellence around leasing. So we tend to have, this is how we operate ourselves, with expertise in the different areas, but within region, it's regional cash management, because this is where we are closest to the business. Johnson & Johnson is just up the road here. I mean, you could walk if you had the energy, because it's up the hill. And that's where we have our regional leadership, our regional financial leadership, and that's why our Treasury Centre is also there, because we're very close to the business partners there.
Yep, good. So I think it's very related to what we have
simple.
shared earlier, you know, talking about Centre of Excellence and finance business partnering. So just to
maybe
share,
let's just,
yeah.
sorry, just got interrupted a little bit just now. Maybe just to add, in terms of the Treasury setup for Shell, so we concentrate, I think, most of the activities in what we call the hubs. So London is our HQ, and then we have a Treasury Centre in Singapore. So we have two Treasury Centres, so London and Singapore. So we actually follow pretty much the Sun model, so the cash concentration in London and in Singapore. But we do have people in other locations, for example, Switzerland, who look after our insurance activities, and as well as in Houston. So in a nutshell, I would say that Treasury is actually very big. So my part of the organization is looking after Treasury operations, but we also have people who are in pensions. We have one of the biggest pensions assets and liabilities amongst, I think, all the MNCs, and these have to be managed well. We also have what we call the asset management. They typically would invest into equity or in bonds. So this is also managed out of London. And we have insurance. So we run a captive insurance program. And I think where we have a big, I would say, construction projects, LNG projects, then they were also looking at the risk management. How much risk do we want to retain versus we want to actually go out to the market? So I think all in all, and I think on top of that, I think there's also one last one, which is also the M&A activities. We have also quite a big in-house M&A team that actually handle all the big, I would say, divestment as well as acquisition projects. So I think a lot of this is we actually work very much hand in hand with the business, as well as what I call some of the finance in the business to execute this.
Right. Thanks a lot. So you could see, you know, how we actually have evolved. Just a quick question is, how do you actually walk to this role as a corporate treasurer? How do you get in? Is it like your first role, or you were mentioning earlier that this was actually not your first function?
Yeah, so I started my career like a lot of the finance people in external audit. So I'm a chartered accountant by qualifications. Then decided to have a little bit change of career and join the corporate. So I've been in Shell for 17 years. So majority of my career is actually in the finance and the business in the downstream. And also spent a number of years in our M&A team in Singapore. So that's the closest I've ever got to Treasury. So in 2017, so for Shell, we're also looking at localizing a lot of the role. So actively giving the locals more opportunities. So I was actually very fortunate to be given that opportunity. I can bring along business partnering skills, a deeper understanding of our downstream businesses, which is a major part for the region. And also my experience in M&A team, executing deals, done quite a lot of new market entries, working on some of the big financing projects. So that, I think that opportunity, I would say that's been the most fantastic that I've ever had. I always tell people that it is actually the best role I've ever had for 3 reasons. First, Treasury, I make decisions every day. In the past, I tend to play a more supporting role, supporting the business, doing a lot of appraisal. This one, I make decisions every day. Things whether to hedge, not to hedge, whether I go and give certain contracts to which bank, and it's a decision that I make, and I take also the outcome of it. The second thing that I always find it very exciting is that is a role that is with high external focus. Anything that happens in the market, I need to understand, is there implication? US and China trade relationship, is there any implication on me? Sanctions happening, so do I have problem with my payments? And I have to keep abreast of this and also think what is the implication. And also on the external focus side, it's also quite very fantastic that I get to meet various parties, from banks to the rest of the other corporate treasurer to other service providers. And I think knowing other people's perspective actually be able to help me to also improve my, I would say, the business processes that I have. And I think the last one I also want to mention is that it is a highly forward-looking role. Nothing is stagnant. Technology is coming up every day, and there's new one. And how do I keep tab of this new technology? Which one is important for me? How do I evaluate this? This is something that is really, I would say, out of the comfort zone of many of the corporate treasurer. And how do I build a good talent pipeline that, that have the capability to do this? So, I mean, it's a very exciting role. And I think a lot of people, in the company certainly see treasury as a very, very important function amongst all the finance teams.
No, thanks, Yan Ping. How about Sonia?
Yeah, so similar to Yan Ping, I was also a chartered accountant by trade. I did all of my qualifications actually in Australia, and that's where I started my career. And then also went from external audit to internal audit in commercial, and then took on within that same organisation. This happened to be an insurance company, a financial controller role. And that's where I had the responsibility to look after a portfolio of investments, more money than I'd ever seen. I was only very young at that time, and I thought, wow, that's a lot of responsibility. So I better understand a bit more about it. And that's where my interest was very much piqued. And that was I did a diploma in what they call fixed interest and investment. A lot of fun. And then I think I then went on the search for, well, there probably are roles out there for treasurers or treasury accountants, as it was at the time. I did that. I joined Johnson & Johnson through that area. And being a big organisation, there was always an opportunity, and it's a sort of organisation that you bring your skills with you. And I think one of the things, it's interesting that we both came from external audit, being able to understand processes and work through the business really helps you as a treasurer, because it doesn't just land on you and say, here, treasurer, figure this out. You often have to work your way through the very beginning of whether it's a business model change or a payments change or whatever it happens to be, understanding those implications. So having a sense of business, very, very helpful. And that was certainly a skill set that I felt that I brought along with me. Then also being accountancy trained also very much helped as well in my career in Treasury. And I guess, that's sort of what landed me into Treasury. And I've been in 3 roles in J&J, all very different, and alternative roles in between as well. But it's also my favourite role. It's been the longest I've spent in any particular role. And it's very empowering, similar. I think we share very similar feelings about the value we can bring to the organisation. And we get called in. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, is that you have so many business partners, both internal and external, because they value the expertise that a treasurer can bring, the lens that we bring, the focus that we bring. And I'm sure we can discuss a bit more about that. But yeah, that's just how I came in.
Well, thanks. We are definitely very, very well regarded in the organization that we are, and corporate treasurers are sometimes labeled as the superheroes in the organization. We are deemed to be able to solve quite a number of things. So let me just ask a question. How do you think sets us different? What's the main difference between a treasurer and, let's say, the other finance professions in our setup? In your setup, probably. Probably start with Yan Ping.
Okay, so the way that I see, so finance is actually very big. So I think collectively, all the finance team, we provide, I would say, like the skeleton of the body to support the business. And that cover tax, controllers and everything. So everyone has got its role. Yeah, controller would record the books. And it's also very important that we need to have those correct information to be able to make management information. And the way that I see Treasury, it is actually like the heart, of the organization. We make sure that, we actually give enough or provide the right amount of liquidity, the financing to support the growth, to meet the obligations at the right time, the right place, and also at the lowest cost. And if I also look at it at a broader level, I mean, we talk about liquidity and FX, everything. If I can just look at it, Treasury, I can put it probably in 3 buckets. One is clearly the role of Treasury. Treasury is the custodian of your company's balance sheet. People in the business and I think people in the finance are interested in more in the P&L, but it's a clear role for Treasury to safeguard the balance sheet, to make sure that it is robust, not only for today, but also for the future. So we have got COVID-19 now. If the balance sheet is not strong, you want to strengthen your balance sheet, it's probably a little bit too late. And if you need credit rating, you have to make sure that whatever thing that you do, would it affect your credit rating? And this is a very clear role for Treasury. I think the other two parts is there are Treasury execution and Treasury advice. So the Treasury execution is like these big Treasury machines, right, that have to be well oiled. And payments have to be done, every day, no overdues. You have to make sure your collection, despite all the COVID-19 situation, and you also have to make sure that there's sufficient liquidity. So I will see that all this thing is like running a machine, and this machine have to pretty much very efficient, and also require a lot of deep technical knowledge, which the general finance doesn't have that deep technical knowledge. And then the third one, I think is easier. I think it's a bit blur. What we call the Treasury advice. So when business have got certain difficult advisory required, for example, can I do certain trade financing? I think other general finance people also have certain knowledge, but the more complex one, then they require, I would say, the Treasury expertise, to do it. I would say, all in all, I think there are clear functions for Treasury that are very defined, but I think there are many other areas. I think Treasury and the rest of the finance team will actually have to work pretty hand in hand to give a strong and robust structure, to the business.
No, thanks. I really like that. Treasury is the heart of the organization. How about Sonia?
Yeah, I mean, I can't add too much more. I think that, of course, that's exactly the point. But I will say that the observation that I have, and I hear this comment often from my analysts when they join, and we recruit either people who have a Treasury background or finance background, because we find that they have the right skill set. And they come in and they say it feels very real. Those decisions that we make every day to secure the financial resources of our businesses is very real. You are empowered to go out there and seek finance or to invest, but there is a business relying on your decision there. So I think, I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, cash is king. It's absolutely, this is what we live and breathe. An organization will fail without cash. It won't fail without profits, but it will fail without cash. And that's a major difference. And then, of course, risk mitigation. one being able to identify the risks as well as mitigate the risks. That's another area that I think Treasury lends its skill sets to that isn't quite as prevalent in some of the other areas of finance. It's very much a skill set that I guess comes with the Treasury profession. And it's not about just the risks of today, it's looking forward to the risks of tomorrow that is even more critical.
Oh, thanks. I think that is really a very good overview of the difference between Treasury and the other finance departments. So we have a lot of audience who are going to view this over our YouTube channel as well. So the younger and those that are aspirants who want to enter the Treasury profession. So would you have any advice for anyone who wants to have a career in Treasury? How do you prepare yourself? Probably I'll start with Sonia.
How to prepare yourself? Well, I think there has to be generally a curiosity about markets. We heard Yian mention you've got to know what's going on externally, right? Because there is going to be an impact. We don't operate in a vacuum. We are very much affected by external market and geopolitical activities. So I think having that curiosity. I think an interest in economics also very helpful. And also somebody who likes information or data and being able to absorb data but create insights, develop insights from that sort of data. So when I say that, I mean, it sounds a little bit generic. I'm talking about, let's say you're working with a business and you are looking at trends of the business. There might be payments trends, it might be cash flow trends. That versus the business, versus certain cycles, versus seasons it could be. There's all sorts of influences, but understand how those numbers reflect on perhaps the cash requirements for a business. So pulling all of those elements together and being able to create the information that helps support or justify your decision, I think that's another very, very important skill to develop and to acknowledge that it's part of what you would do to prepare yourself for a role in Treasury.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for Shell, we recruit externally as well as fill our roles internally. I think really depending on the type of roles, I think the certain types of role, I'm actually looking for a very hardcore Treasury skill set. For example, when I hire FX dealers, somebody who really understands the FX markets, how the deal system works. Those come in quite important for me. So I think people who have got already demonstrated a track record, career, in that, I think that will certainly comes in, very, very helpful. I think then we have got these other areas whereby we are very open to, people without the technical background. I think those who really have done Treasury, I think, is a bonus. So if you really understand cash management, FX liquidity management, I think it certainly comes in very strong. And we have got a mix of people with strong technical knowledge, and we also have taken risks with people who don't have. But it doesn't mean that anyone who doesn't have any Treasury background we are prepared to take. There's also certain criteria that are very important. I think that's when what Sonia mentioned about your whole personal attributes. Are you curious about what is happening in the market? Are you one of those that when you read a newspaper, something happened on the political side, you're curious to read and also understand the implications? Are you also interested in terms of what is happening on the technology space? Are you interested in going through the processes? Cash management, it actually require, quite in-depth knowledge, and also the appetite, to roll up your sleeves sometimes to look into the process. Do you have that aptitude for it? And I think another thing that I find myself been looking for it over and over again is actually the core accounting skills. I mentioned earlier on, we are the custodian of the balance sheet. I need to take somebody who comes in should understand whatever things that we do on the financing, what could be the impact on the balance sheet. I do a capital reduction. So what is the implication? Business having M&A activity could be the acquisition or divestment. What could that happen to my group structure? And I always find it is harder to train people to have that solid, accounting knowledge mid-career. I think somebody who already have it coming in, I can actually help them to build up the other treasury skill set much easier. I think the other aspect that I think would be really helpful to have that on the interpersonal skill side are really around stakeholder engagements. We manage quite a range of diverse of stakeholders, internal and external. So the ability to have the influencing skills and strong communication skill will be very important. And I think lastly, we usually have got various type of project, mini projects to upgrade our systems, to work alongside our M&A team and business team to integrate an acquisition. So somebody who actually have that project management skills and also leadership ability, I think those are also very important.
Wow. That's why you see treasurers are regarded as superheroes as well. We need to know not only just about the technical domains, but we need to handle all the different stakeholders. And you need to be well-versed, sensitive to political and technology developments. So I'll open the floor for the audience. If you have any questions, please, can I have the mic?
I'm Vincent Lou from Bloomberg. I spent 12 years with the bank before I joined Bloomberg. That is with Tukai Bank back in 1992. And when I deal with all these corporations, all of them that I deal with, they are all accountants. Basically, they just actually managing the cash flow. But I think a couple of years before I left to join Bloomberg, the role has changed. They now have a layer below the accountants. That is the CFO, the chief. Yeah, they just started. And then now I see that the treasury operations, I think mainly in Singapore, right, because we are now become a regional center, has actually evolved into a very specific role where we have like corporate treasurer and so forth, and they even have a research and support team, and some of them are moving into even setting up what I call a data science, to actually manage this, right? So I think you have talked about what the role of all this audience here should have, if they are going to corporate treasury. But I think that I think because of COVID-19, this is like an inflection point. I think things are changing. I think that Seng Ti has alluded to. He draw a blank page, right? So maybe you can actually fill up that page by actually maybe projecting forward, right, in your role, where you think the corporate treasury will go. I mean, it may be right or wrong, but we are at this point, right? I think it's changing again. I've seen that role change, but I think it's going to change one more, evolving soon. So maybe you share with us what you will change to, so that the audience here, the junior, can picture, right, what skill set I need to actually do to get myself there. Because as a junior, when I grow up, I plan certain stages where I think is happening, so that I can get myself ready, right? The various little steps that I need to actually get to where I am. So I think this will benefit the audience this year.
Yep, I think that's a very good question.
I'm
always thinking of the young people.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question. So we have the Treasury 1.0, now 2.0, and then 3.0 and beyond. So I think the key question that many of us have is, how do we prepare and future-proof ourselves for Treasury 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think your observation is right. And I think even as I observe various treasury operations, they're at different stages. What you said about it was cash management. Yeah, pay the bills, get the money in. It was very much that transactional element. And I've seen it evolve to risk manager. Okay, so then your risk is across many, many areas. It's interest, it's foreign currency, it's sovereign depending on which countries, okay, that you know, all your geographies. It's your counterparties, it's your capital structure, it's broad. So saying risk management sounds like a simple thing, it's a massive thing, right? Because especially in this region is really exciting. If I was to say sovereign risk, well, that in itself is a job in itself, right? Because if you just look at some of the economies that we deal with, the regulations that come our way, being able to manage them, and often with a high degree of agility. We don't often get an opportunity to react. You know, I can give you an example. In India, they issued a regulation, and this is transactionally based, but they said, you know, people whose revenue was effectively over $7 million US equivalent, needed to collect funds using these alternative payment methods, QR codes, RuPay, debit cards, and various alternatives. Now, they gave us a matter of weeks to get that implemented. And we can go out and do that, but then the downstream business says, well, now what do I do? I wasn't prepared to collect information via a QR code, etc. So you're working across so many different areas there. And in this region, and that's risk mitigation, right? Because you've got regulatory risk there as well, another area. I think, though, the next step is the value creator. You know, I think we've gone from very much protecting, we talk about the custodian of the balance sheet, conserving those assets, but I think it's then the value creator and being able to bring those skills and bringing the expertise we have to the business to identify those opportunities to help drive value for the business. That's where I see the evolution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think if I look at what is happening now, I think what we have seen with the COVID-19, that actually presented quite a lot of opportunity for, I would say, the digitalizations. People looking at various opportunity to improve their collection and payments. And also with a lot of pressure, I would say, on the profitability, the organization is also looking at ways that Treasury can contribute, to this. So when I talk about digitalization, it is not just, digitalization for just digitalization's sake. There must be a problem. Then how do we then help to solve the problem? And if you're actually taking it a little bit broader, so it's not just the case of just reducing costs, but also help the business to generate revenue, to create business opportunity, to change the business model, and maybe even changing that industry. I think there's certainly a scope, over there. So I think for us in Shell, certainly for COVID-19 presented a lot of challenges, as well opportunity in terms of our cash collection at the front line. We have stranded checks. How do we improve a lot of this? And these actually take, I would say, a different type of, skill set compared to before. My team actually have to then look into a lot of this platform that are available. It's not that they're not available. I mean, they are, but really looking at it, which is actually evaluating, which is actually best for us. And not only that, but also educating the business. Mm-hmm. We should adopt this, and usually we find it that is actually the one that sometimes is a little bit difficult. People are resisting to change. They're very comfortable. Yes. The customer is happy to do that. Why should I do that? So that also requires a different skill set. How do you articulate the business case and put forward that, we need to do things because there's a business problem and there's a solution. And I would say that this will be the increasing different type of skill set the treasurer would play to convincing the business to drive change. And I think if you're looking across, there are various technology, RPA, AI, how do you improve your forecasting, using the data that you have. The data science itself is a big area. If you ask me, do we all have the skill set today to do it? We don't. So which is a good technology? And how do we go about doing it? And and when we do this, exactly what is the outcome that we could achieve? And I think as a starting point, which I think my team is doing quite a lot, is that we are actually engaging a lot with the business to understand the business problems and how can we come in, to play a role, to help them to improve the cost, reduce the cost and improve the revenue. Yeah.
Yep, so I'll just summarize it. That was really good. So the operational, transactional bit that we have been doing, I think that's a given. And then the next one will be your risk management and your analytics. The third is your value adding. And then the final one is don't digitize for the sake of digitizing. You really need to create solutions to solve real problems. And a lot of times we are in for change management. So I think these are the skill sets, the evolution that I think the panelists have mentioned. I'll open the floor again to another question. So we do have some time. Please feel free.
Yeah, I think just now you mentioned there are so many technologies outside. And then just for individuals, like what kind of technology can we should we start with? Because for the reporting tools, I heard about Tableau or Power BI, those kind of stuff. And then you also mentioned AI, RPAs. These are really pretty new to me, at least, as just a treasury. So what's your recommendation to kind of start from this technology? Because there are so many technologies.
Yeah, actually, I can start. I'm not sure that I have all the answers there, but you mentioned Tableau, and I think that's a really good one because also I mentioned earlier about being able to bring together information and synthesize it and create insights from it, and then Tableau helps visualize it. And this is the sort of thing that can be very impactful for yourself in understanding whether it's an issue with a trend or a business development, or to your stakeholders. Engaging with your business partners is probably one of the key areas, one of the areas that you should, well, I believe you should spend a lot of time. Your role exists because your business exists, and you have to very much connect with them. So I find that I believe Tableau is very effective visualization tool. I hate to say it, but we're still using a lot of Excel, and that's very painful also, but we are evolving that. But it's funny how we try to go to the next stage and then we always come back. We sort of, there at this stage we haven't found that right tool that can completely eliminate, but being able to understand enterprise ERPs, so things like SAP, etc., as well as I don't know enough about the data science tools, and maybe my colleagues here will have a better sense of that. But yeah, I mean, mine are fairly fundamental. And being able to operate a treasury management system also is fairly key.
So I think the way that I look at it, we talk about there are certain various technology, and there are people who I would say is a specialist in those technology. So even you're talking about data science, there are data scientists. So do I expect my treasury team to be able to do all this, I would say, the job of a data scientist? So the answer is clearly no. Yeah, we are not expected, they are not expected to be able to pull data and draw insights. What we actually like to see them is that they understand the business. What could be the relationship between different type of data that could actually help to improve the business. So it's that business understanding that is very important. And then I think it's really through working with this group of, I would think, the specialists that know all this technology, and then to kind of validate, the understanding. Is that an issue? And if there's an issue, or is that an opportunity, what can we go about, doing this? I think a lot of this is with our internal team as well as with external providers. Not forgetting that, bank hold a lot of our data, other services provider hold a lot of data. So, and also it's to be the connector of all these parties, coming together. Because I think very often, I think what we find it is that, you put two technical teams, talking to each other. They just tell you everything is not possible. There's no, I cannot get anything out, from it. But I think it's when treasury coming in, you understand a little bit of all these various things, and also you have the business understanding, and you can actually pull together, a solution, So I think that is what I would see the future treasury team and treasurer would have is that appreciation of the technology and be able to evaluate which technology is potentially better able to bring about a solution.
Yep. So I think it's important for us to find the right technology for data visualization, and then more importantly, to do a financial storytelling. So that's where the treasurers will use the system, the data, the technology to tell the story for the finance and for the management.
Yeah.
I encourage you to ask questions. Right, so I'll have one, I'll jump in. So why is Asia Pacific so interesting for us, for corporate treasurers, especially for a global setup?
Okay, should I jump
Yep,
in?
go ahead.
Okay. I think, it's such a diverse region. So that's what I find very interesting. It's so dynamic, and every day is a new day. You really don't know what you're going to encounter. So for me, it spans 14 countries. And, there'll be days where we think, and the way that I operate my team as well is I assign countries to the team. So they very much partner with that particular country. And people will say, oh, I've got Japan, everything's great, so easy, everything's orderly. And then they're eating their words a week later when they say, oh, this is so tough. So it's never, I think you often encounter, I won't say surprises, but they are obviously challenging environments that you have to deal with. And I think that's what makes it really, really interesting, because you have to flex your problem-solving skills. You have to be agile. Oftentimes you have to react very, very quickly to evaluate the implications for the business and the implications for the Treasury organisation. There's a lot of growth. If you look across, again, this region, it's the fastest growing region, certainly in our business. So that comes with it like a certain degree of responsibility, an elevated degree of responsibility, again, because we have to make sure that that's sustainable growth, right? We can't just let it run wild. I think that makes it really, really interesting. When you just look around, the currencies that we have, more than half of the currencies we deal with are non-deliverable. So it's not a simple thing. We talk about currency, and it's a very different discussion we're having between EMEA and here in this region. Time zones. I think my region, we cross 6 time zones just, for each individual in my day. Languages, the number of languages we have. I think all of those sorts of things just creates a matrix of complexity. But if you love complexity, that's what I like. That's why Asia Pacific is a fun place to be.
How about Yian Ping?
Yeah, so I always joke with my counterparts in Europe and US. They might have a bigger dimension, or maybe by, if you're looking at the collectively of the land size, like in the US and in Europe. But I by far have a more complex and also more interesting role. We are a dollar company. In the US, dollar, so it's very easy for them. Europe, majority in Europe. But I have to manage, many currencies in this region. And each one of them has got lots of challenges, whether it's the fluctuations or regulatory control that comes in. I still remember that, before I came to the role, I was doing the handover in December 2016, and Malaysia imposed the regulatory control, and it imposed on a Friday, and in effect on Monday. I remember seeing the Treasury team, give me a taste of, the exciting weekend that they have, unfortunately, to figure out the solutions. And then as soon as I came to the role, China had the window guidance. I was still pretty new. I was looking for regulation, and people told me that, there's no regulation, And then we have to pay, attention, our eyes and ears on the ground, to know what is happening. And our cash pool was stopped. And then we have to restart it, and you want to restart it as soon as possible, and you need to know the timing and what are the new things that need to come in. So I think that in itself give, I would say, a lot of challenges, but also make it quite exciting, because you you know, you have to keep abreast of, you know, the political, the regulatory development. You have to look forward and say, if something happened, what could go wrong? And my bosses in London is going to come to me and say, you know, what happened? So it's back to the risk management. Why haven't you preempted it? You know, what could we do? What happened to the trapped cash with all these changes? So I need to think 2 steps in advance, you know, to mitigate those risks. And with this diverse number of countries over here, and most of them are regulated, I need to maintain a lot more bank relationship. In Europe, in the US, they can just, you know, manage relationship with the bigger banks, international bank. But here I have to deal with many, many local banks. And the way to deal with them is actually quite different from you deal with, you know, the American banks. And we do need them. And again, then we look at it, how do you maintain a good balance of your international bank and local bank? And that also need quite a bit of planning. Yeah, so I think all this, I think bits and pieces, everything, you know, just add together, I think will just make the whole Asia region a lot more exciting. And I also see that it actually gives a fuller treasury role, because we have to understand a lot wider than, you know, my treasury teams in the US and Europe. So on the cash management, on the FX management, on risk management, in terms of competency level, I certainly think that here offers a lot more than other regions.
Actually, I just wanted to add something that I didn't mention on that as I think about it. Because I think about the fact that I've been in this role for many years, and yet still learning. At the end of every year, I say, I want to do this again. You know, I still have more to learn. And I think why I come to that decision is that, you know, one of the key objectives is to make sure you've got a cash flow solution or a cash management solution per country. And you like to sort of move that cash management solution to its most mature state. And you get something that you think works country by country. But every year you revisit it and you find there's another opportunity, something has changed. So it's never something you do and you say, okay, an in-house bank or a cash pool, that's going to work for that country. And we leave it there. You will find when you revisit it, regulations have moved, and then you might find a different opportunity. So you're constantly looking at and refining the work that you've done. And that brings added interest as well, because I think the countries here all leverage each other as well, and they're also in varying areas along their own development curve, and they have different approaches. I mean, I love China's approach is pilot till perfect, you know, so they'll pilot, and when they introduce something, it's perfect. With others, will jump in and release something, and then when everybody challenges it, they go, okay, that doesn't work, so they take it back. And in the meantime, we've all reacted. So it's quite interesting. You don't know what you're going to face every day, so you have to embrace change yourself and know that, okay, there's only one thing. You can't control it, but you can react to it and try to manage it. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to ask a similar question, right? On this similar subject. I know that credit risk control in the US and in EMEA is very transparent. And they don't have, they always tell me, when I talk to them right now, I don't have issue, you know, because if I deal with them, they need to provide all the document, I can see everything. But in Asia, it's a different thing. It's so gray, right? In fact, sometimes I don't know how you guys actually, you know, manage and mitigate this risk, right? So how does a treasury, when you deal with so many Asian customer, and then you have the parent, and then you don't know what level it is or where it belongs to? It's a lot of it dealing with Asian, Indonesian, Chinese. They hide, or rather they don't review to you. Then how do you then? I think everybody here in this room will actually encounter as well. How do you then actually, you know, assess the risk, or use? Some of the company that I know, they say, when we don't understand, we don't deal with them. But that is a business loss, right? So, I mean, then how do you then manage it? I think this is something that everybody want to know, the credit risk. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. So I think the question is and the concerns, right? We have mentioned as well the rising concerns and attention towards credit risk, especially in this part of the world, the jurisdiction, and then the makeup of SMEs in Asia Pacific is much more higher than in anywhere else. So I think it's a very relevant concern for us. So how do you actually go about managing that?
Well, I mean, we have a global policy, and our global policy would have a requirement for due diligence on our customers before we're able to provide any sort of credit. If we aren't able to satisfy ourselves of the credit worthiness of a counterparty, we just won't offer credit. It's fairly simple. You really want to work with us? Cash up front, okay? Letter of credit, other terms of trade. So it's all about the trading terms. But it's a standard policy. It works across the globe, and it obviously it counters for all of the different types of business units that we might encounter across the world. Yeah.
So I think there are two types of due diligence or screening. So in the first one is actually on the counterparty screening. Is it a good counterparty from their business conduct, their integrity? So we actually have got a global trade control and compliance team. So they have big databases, information sources. So then they'll run screening on any potential counterparty. So if anyone that raise a red flag, then we can't deal. So there are others that, potentially other mitigation need to put in place. But if we have got concern on any counterparty, then we can't deal at all. Then I think the second level then will be on the credit, the credit position of the counterparty. Then it's the same as J&J. So there's a global policy around, what kind of, financial standing we require from the counterparty. And then also if they don't meet it, what are the other, potential options that they can do, cash before delivery, banker guarantees, letter of credits. So then you have got, certain, orders that go through the credit policy.
Right. So I'll just ask the final question since we are running short of time. So parting words for everyone. What do you think would be the 3 key challenges for the treasurers in the new digital normal that's to come, or rather is already now?
Okay, I'll start. I think, I've spoken a bit about data. I think that that's going to be a big challenge because it's very much being delivered in the electronic mode, and there's a lot of it. So around that, there's implications like privacy, potential fraud. I think that that's going to be definitely a challenge. I think regulations will continue to evolve. And a big one is in the space of KYC, know your customer. Okay, everybody's nodding, so we've had that discussion. Okay, I think the requirements there will continue to increase. It's quite onerous. It's a big job for treasurers to be able to interpret those requirements, be able to do it as with the minimal impact to the business, but to be able to satisfy the banks that we work with. So I think that's another major area. Let me see, what would be my third? I guess that's it really, reg and data and privacy issues. Compliance, I guess I would capture it. Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, the first one is around the technology. Change is inevitable, and it's going to be coming very fast. And then do we understand the change? Are we equipped to deal with the change? I think the answer is, I think most of us are still trying to, to understand, to cope with that change. And that would remain, I would say, as a challenge for many of us. And I think the second one is really, I think that's what Sonia mentioned, in this part of the world, I think there's a lot of regulatory development, political development as well. How do you keep abreast of this to mitigate your risk and also find opportunity to support your business? And the third one is people are very important for any treasury organization. With the change that is coming, and when we are struggling this as well ourselves, then how do we build our treasury team, the talent pipeline, and equip them with the competency and as well as ourselves to cope with that change. And I think I think that will have to be balanced with both the technical as well as the soft skills. I think I mentioned earlier on about the ability to drive change, the ability to engage the business and articulate that. So I think we do need to spend more time to build the talent pipeline and equip them for the treasury for the future.
So thanks again. Thank you very much, Yan Ping and Sonia, for joining us, and thank you for the audience and all those watching this video. So thank you, and I wish you, and let us prepare for the new digital normal, where regulations are going to be an issue, technology, the embracement of technology, and lastly, I think people. I think that's what we are all here for this workshop as well, to future-proof ourselves for the new digital normal. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.